Hello everyone, a very happy new year to all of you and welcome to our PMP exam question and answer solving session for January. Now, if you are preparing for the PMP exam, you can use today's class to assess how well you are prepared for the exam, okay? So out of the 5 questions that we are going to solve today, the target will be to get all the 5 out of the 5 questions correct. However, the minimum expectation is that you should get at least 4 out of the 5 questions correct to consider yourself fairly well prepared for the PMP exam. Now, anything less than that, you might need a bit more preparation, okay? Also, if you are preparing for the PMP exam, you might want to check out my training courses on Udemy, and you can also consider to join my YouTube membership community. All of them are very well reviewed amongst the students like you, and I will provide all the details on how you can join the same later on in this video, okay? So give this video a like, get a pen and a paper, and let's get started with question number 1.
Right, so question number 1, guys, please read the question and try to answer it before we solve this together. You can pause the video here if you wish to. Right, so let's get started. So in this given scenario, you are a Scrum Master leading a cross-functional agile team that encounters unexpected technical challenges midway through a sprint. So the question asks you to decide how to address the situation, balancing agile principles with, of course, practical project management. Now, the situation, if you look here, guys, emphasizes 2 core elements of agile project management, okay? Maintaining the integrity of the sprint and adapting to change without disrupting the team's focus, right? So as a role of a Scrum Master, you need to facilitate the team's ability to deliver value while navigating uncertainties effectively. So let's look at the options one by one. So let's look at option A first. So option A suggests extending the sprint timeline to accommodate the technical challenges. Now, this might seem like a reasonable step to ensure quality, okay? However, it directly contradicts with the agile principle of time boxing, okay? So please go back to your agile practice guide and understand what does time boxing mean in agile, okay? So according to the Agile Practice Guide, one of the key tenets of Agile is to maintain a fixed sprint duration to create predictability and consistency. Altering the sprint length can disrupt team rhythm, or sometimes this is called cadence as well as part of Agile terminology. It also sets a precedent for similar disruptions in future sprints. Option A can safely be eliminated because it undermines the sprint structure, which is the cornerstone of effective agile project management. Now let's look at option C. So option C proposes escalating the issue to senior management and requesting additional resources. Escalation might be necessary in certain scenarios. However, this approach is disproportionate to the problem which has been given as part of this scenario. So it is definitely a bit of an overkill to do an escalation at this point because technical challenges are a normal part of agile process, okay? And the team is expected to address such issues collaboratively. Furthermore, escalation can delay decision making, and of course, it can shift the accountability away from the team to your project sponsor or to your project executives, right? Which, if you think, goes against the agile value of empowering self organizing teams. Therefore, option C can also be safely eliminated because it is failing to address the principles of agile and it is not a realistic or a proportionate response. Now, with that, we are left with option B and option D. Okay. Now, if we look at option D very closely, guys, it suggests reprioritizing the backlog mid sprint to focus on high priority items, and it asks you to defer the less critical ones. Okay. Now, this option is tempting because it aligns with the agile principle of prioritizing value. Okay. Someone can argue. However, reprioritizing the backlog during an ongoing sprint disrupts the team's focus and undermines the commitment made during the sprint planning, right? Think about it. The PMBOK 7th edition of the Agile Practice Guide highlights that the purpose of a sprint planning is to create a shared understanding of the sprint goals and the objectives, which in turn fosters accountability within the team, right? So allowing mid-sprint reprioritization compromises this shared understanding, and this can definitely lead to confusion, reduced productivity, and unmet commitments. So while option D roughly appears to be agile friendly, okay, or maybe appears to be the right option on the surface, it is fundamentally at odds with the discipline and the predictability required in Scrum. And that leaves us with option B, which is the correct answer to this question, because this encourages the team to maximize completion within the current sprint while deferring any unfinished work to the backlog for future prioritization. So, this approach adheres to the agile principle of delivering incremental value within fixed time frames. It acknowledges the challenges without derailing the sprint or creating unnecessary chaos within the team. So, by deferring the unfinished work and reprioritizing your backlog, the team can maintain its focus on the sprint goal while ensuring that the product backlog remains dynamic and adaptable. And that is why option B is the correct answer to this question. Option D is quite close, but it is an incorrect answer choice.
Now, if you are preparing for your PMP exam, guys, I would suggest that you check out my PMP exam preparation courses on Udemy. All the courses are very highly rated amongst the students, and many PMP aspirants like you have passed their PMP exam with the help of these courses. You can check the student reviews on Udemy, and all the links will be provided in the description section of this video in case you are interested to join. Okay, and now let's move on to question number 2.
Okay, so question number 2, guys, please pause the video, read the question and try to answer it before we solve this together. Right, so let's get started. So in this scenario, the project manager is faced with a critical challenge, right? The cost per user story has increased significantly due to a faulty platform that is no longer supported. Now, complicating matters further, the product vision specifies that unique features of the platform are essential for the product's success. So the question asks what the project manager should do to determine the next steps, focusing on aligning the project's objectives with realistic constraints as has been presented in this scenario. So let's first begin by examining option A, which suggests canceling the project due to exceeding the budget constraint. Now, of course, cost overruns are a significant concern. However, immediately canceling the project is a reactive decision that doesn't take into account the possibility of resolving the issue proactively, right? So, a project manager should focus on value delivery and evaluate all possible alternatives before making a drastic decision like termination, right? So, a thorough assessment, including cost benefit analysis or trade off scenarios, is necessary to make an informed choice. So, option A is eliminated for being premature and overtly definitive. Okay, so next, let's look at option C, which suggests canceling the project because the product vision cannot be fulfilled. Now, although the unique platform features are a prerequisite for the product or for the project, as mentioned in the question, however, the scenario doesn't state that fulfilling the product vision is impossible because you need to take into consideration that the challenges that the project currently faces is due to a platform that is faulty. There are like 1001 moving bits in the project other than this platform, which also needs to be true for the success of the project, right? So if you look at the PMBOK, it emphasizes that the project managers must evaluate the feasibility of all the alternatives before coming to a conclusion, which is, let's say, cancellation or termination of a project. So that is why option C is also quite drastic, and hence it is an incorrect answer choice. Now we are left with option B and option D. Okay. Now, both of these seem viable because they propose actionable next steps. However, let's look at each of the options a bit more closely. Now, if you look at option B closely, it suggests that asking the product owner to select an alternative platform. At a first glance, this seems like a practical solution. Changing the platform could address the underlying technical issue and reduce the cost. However, this approach has a significant drawback. It skips the critical step of assessing cost, time, and impact, and other implications, let's say in terms of contracts or let's say in terms of usability, while switching platforms. So, as a project manager, you should always stress the importance of analyzing the effects of potential changes on project objectives, timelines, and budgets, okay? Because every change comes with an impact, right? Selecting a new platform without running what if scenarios, or let's say some kind of sensitivity analysis, could lead to further cost escalations, unforeseen technical issues, or a misalignment with stakeholders' priorities. And that is why option B is an incorrect answer choice. And that leaves us with option D, which is the correct answer to this question. Because this approach is aligned with the project management best practices, because it involves assessing multiple options through what if scenarios or sensitivity analysis and evaluating the consequences of a decision. So, what if scenario analysis is a vital technique for evaluating risks, costs, and trade off for choosing option A over option B. Okay. So, by involving the product owner in this what if scenario analysis, the project manager ensures that key stakeholders are part of the decision making process and that the final decision is based on data driven insights rather than just assumptions. This step preserves the project manager's focus on value delivery while addressing the challenges systematically. And that is why the correct answer to this question is option D.
Now, before we move on to question number 3, guys, I would suggest that you check out my membership community on YouTube as part of your PMP exam preparation. I share daily posts on PMP exam tips, tricks, and strategies via this platform. It's a monthly subscription based service, okay, and you can cancel anytime you want to. All the links will be provided in the description section of this video, so please do check it out, okay. And now let's move on to question number 3.
So question number 3, guys, please read the question. The drill will remain the same. Pause the video and try to answer it before we solve this together. Right, so let's get started. So in this scenario, a project manager is faced with the challenge of defining the scope for a project that involves multiple phases with significant dependencies between them, right? So the question asks how the project manager should approach the situation to ensure the project scope is clearly defined while addressing the inherent complexities. So let's evaluate the options one by one. First, let's look at option A, which suggests hiring an external consultant to help define the project scope. Now, while hiring a consultant might provide expertise and facilitate scope definition, it is not the best choice for two reasons. Firstly, this approach can bypass the internal stakeholder involvement, which is critical for ensuring that the scope of the project remains aligned with the organizational goals and the specific needs of the project. So it is but obvious, right? Because if you are not keeping your internal stakeholders involved first and you are suddenly getting an external consultant and hiring the same to solve some problem for you, it literally questions the competence of your internal team members or your internal stakeholders. Okay, so that is why this is the first reason why option A is incorrect. Now, secondly, option A assumes that the scope can be definitively fixed by an external input, which is unlikely in a complex dependency driven project. Okay, so if you go through the project management body of knowledge, it emphasizes stakeholder collaboration and engagement, which are both essential for successful project outcomes. So before hiring an external consultant as a project manager, your first line of defense should be getting into a brainstorming or a spike session with your agile team to first explore the possible options, and hiring an external consultant should not be your first line of defense. So that is why option A is eliminated, because it shifts the responsibility for scope definition away from the project team and stakeholders. Now let's evaluate option D, which suggests moving forward with the project while monitoring dependency issues daily. So this option might seem maybe pragmatic, or I'll say it seems a lot of micromanagement, as it suggests dealing with challenges as they arise. And also, it is very, very reactive and fails to address the core problem, which is to define a clear scope upfront. So by proceeding without resolving the dependency and the scope issues, the project manager risks encountering misalignments, delays, and rework. According to the project management best practices, proactively addressing the scope and dependency issues during the planning phase is essential for minimizing risks during the project execution. So daily status meetings or addressing dependency issues daily is a lot of reactive approach, a lot of micromanagement, and that is why option D is also incorrect. So now let's look at option B and option C. Now first, let's look at option C because that is the incorrect answer choice. So option C proposes reviewing the project plan to add buffer time to the schedule followed by revising the scope. Adding buffer time might address the scheduling challenges, but it does not solve the core issue of the unclear scope, right? So please go back to my previous Q&A sessions where I have discussed repeatedly that for these kind of questions, you need to focus on the core issue or the base issue as per the given scenario. So if you have not practiced from the previous Q&A sessions, I would strongly urge you to go and practice from the same. Furthermore, for this option, revising the scope without a collaborative process or iterative refinement assumes that the scope can be finalized in one step, which is of course unrealistic in a project. And of course, it is highly unrealistic for such kind of a project which has very, very high dependency and the complexity of the dependencies. So this approach risks creating a rigid plan that might not accommodate the evolving needs of the project, leading to potential misalignments during the project execution. So while option C might look a proactive approach on the facade, it is ultimately incorrect because it lacks the flexibility and stakeholder involvement required for effective scope management in this context. And that leaves us with option B, which is the correct answer to this question. So option B addresses the challenge holistically by focusing on collaboration, adaptability, and iterative refinement. So these elements are critical for managing complex projects with high levels of dependency. This approach ensures that the project scope evolves in alignment with stakeholder needs and the realities of the project environment, minimizing risks and enhancing the likelihood of success becomes the guiding cornerstone of the project manager in every decision making. So to summarize, option B captures all the elements of a sensible way of project management, and the correct answer to this question is option B.
Now, before we move on to question number 4, guys, make sure you do subscribe to my channel PMP with Ray for more such videos like this for your PMP exam preparation, okay? Your support really helps educational channels like this to grow on YouTube. And now, let's move on to question number 4.
Right, so question number 4, guys. Please read the question and try to answer it before we take this together. You can pause the video here if you wish to. Right, so let's get started. So in this scenario, the operations director has requested the agile team to prioritize the development of an AI chatbot for automating customer support, okay? The directive emphasizes speed and prioritization, which is of course very much needed in agile methodology, right? Now the question asks what the project manager should do to begin the development process, and which is requiring a decision that aligns with the agile principles and supports the project's objectives efficiently. Okay, so let's start evaluating the options one by one. So let's start with option, which is to collaborate with stakeholders and SMEs to break the features into detailed user stories. Now, this option can be ruled out quite early because while creating user stories is an essential step in Agile, it is quite premature at this stage, okay? Before user stories can be developed, the project team must first define the overall scope and the functionality of the solution. Without a clear understanding of the project's priorities, or let's say the boundaries of what constitutes the product's initial version or MVP, diving into user stories without even developing the MVP might be quite tricky and might result in a lot of misalignment with the product versus the business goals, okay? So this option, although may be relevant in the later process, is not the appropriate first step. So we can rule out option A. Now let's look at option B, which recommends conducting a risk assessment workshop with the team or the product owner and the SMEs. Okay. Now, risk assessment is, of course, important in any project. However, agile projects, please remember that they focus on iterative delivery and value realization rather than comprehensive upfront risk analysis. Okay. Now, this is a very stark difference between a waterfall project and an agile project, because in a waterfall project, what you typically do is you try to analyze and come up with as many risks as possible at the very upfront of the project, but this is not the case in agile. Okay, so in this context, the focus is on defining the minimum scope required to deliver value quickly, which is the MVP, right? A detailed risk workshop would be more applicable in a, let's say, predictive project, which we have already discussed. Okay, where it is important to identify as many risks as possible at the very initial stages of the project. Okay, so therefore option B, though it is valuable in a broader project management context, it is not the best choice to begin the process in this agile scenario. Now we are left with option C and option D. Okay, so let's look at option C first, which suggests asking the team to estimate the effort and prepare a feasibility report. Now, at a first glance, this option seems like a reasonable approach, right? Because understanding the feasibility of the project, you might say that it is essential, right? However, in agile methodology, feasibility is not determined through a static upfront report, okay? But it is determined through iterative cycles and quick delivery of working solutions. Preparing a feasibility report introduces an unnecessary delay and contradicts the agile principle of focusing on delivering value early and often. Okay, and this is where the entire context of minimum viable product comes in. Okay, so if you go back to your PMBOK 7th edition or the agile practice guide, you will see that agile emphasizes on delivering value and focusing on outcomes as quickly and as iteratively as possible rather than upfront detailed planning, etc., etc. Okay, so that is why option C is a very close answer choice, but it is incorrect. And the correct answer to this question is option D, which involves working with the product owner, SME, and the team to define the scope and the functionality of the initial release version, which is the minimum viable product, right? So this aligns perfectly with the agile principles, which of course prioritizes identifying the smallest set of features that can deliver value to your stakeholders. So according to the Agile Practice Guide, the concept of value delivery, it is central to this entire option of option D, and defining the MVP is a practical way of, let's say, demonstrating this principle of Agile MVP. Okay, because by focusing on the MVP, the team can ensure rapid deployment and feedback, allowing subsequent iterations to refine and expand the solution based on a real world use case. So to summarize, option D directly supports the project's need for prioritization and rapid value delivery through the definition of the initial release version or the minimum viable product. And that is why it is the correct answer choice.
I hope you are finding this exercise helpful, right? Remember, the target is to get all the 5 out of the 5 questions correct. However, the minimum expectation is that you should get at least 4 out of the 5 questions correct, right? So here comes the 5th and the final question.
Right, so the 5th and the final question, guys, the drill will remain the same. Right, so let's get started. So in this scenario, the project manager is leading a high stakes initiative to develop a new software product, which is critical to achieve the organization's quarterly revenue goals. Now, a key team member has been replaced by a new developer, and a senior stakeholder has expressed concerns about whether this new developer has the necessary skills to handle their assigned tasks effectively. So the question asks the project manager to address this concern in a manner that aligns with the project management principles, prioritizing evidence-based decision making and stakeholder engagement. Okay, so what do you think the project manager should do to address this concern? So let's evaluate the options one by one. So let's look at option A, which suggests assessing the developer's ability by observing their interactions and communication with the rest of the team. Now, of course, communication and collaboration are essential in any project. However, they are secondary in this scenario, okay, as the concern raised by the stakeholder pertains specifically to the developer's technical and professional skills. Now, observing team interactions alone would not provide sufficient evidence to address whether the developer can deliver the technical results required for the project. Okay. So that is the primary reason that option A is an incorrect answer choice. Now let's look at option C, which involves submitting a formal change request to the resource allocation team to assign a more qualified developer. Now, escalating resource concerns may be necessary in some very exceptional situations. However, as we have kept on discussing in our Q&A monthly sessions, that escalation should be your last resort as a project manager, and it should be based on evidence that the assigned resource is indeed incapable of performing the task. Okay, so you cannot escalate this to your resource allocation team or to your project sponsor just because some stakeholder is complaining about this particular resource, right? By suggesting that the resource is unfit before verifying their skills properly, right? So escalating too early also undermines the adaptive nature of project management, where resources are optimized and guided to contribute more and more effectively. Okay, so generally in your PMP exam, please keep in mind that whenever an option asks for escalation, your alarm bells should start ringing in your ears, because generally these kind of options are incorrect. However, it's not one size fits for all. There are very few specific situations like health and safety, quality, compliance, etc., which indeed needs escalations. So if you go back to my previous Q&A sessions, you will see that I have discussed few questions where actually escalation is the right methodology. But coming back to this scenario, escalation is not the correct answer choice in this question. Now, let's look at option D, which is to discuss the stakeholders' concern with the developer's line manager to clarify the situation and ensure alignment within the team. Okay. Now think about it. If you are the line manager and the project manager is coming to you and let's say complaining about your developer, what would be your first reaction about the project manager? So you would definitely feel that the project manager is approaching you as the functional manager only based on indirect feedback, rather than the project manager himself or herself taking the initiative to assess the resource themselves, right? Now, you as the developer's line manager might know this person or might know the skills of this person individually. However, that may not reflect how the developer is performing within the specific context of the project. Furthermore, addressing the concern as a rumor risks creating unnecessary tension between the project team and external stakeholders. So while this option demonstrates communication and conflict resolution very remotely, it does not prioritize objective evidence-based decision making by the project manager when the project manager is actually approaching the line manager based on some random feedback of one of the stakeholders. Okay, so that is why option D is also incorrect. And that leaves us with option B, which is the correct answer choice, which is to evaluate the developer's technical and professional skills directly as yourself as the project manager, which is the most effective and, mind my words guys, evidence based approach. Okay, this is very important skill as a project manager, that whenever you are enabling a decision making or taking a decision, it should be a evidence based decision making. Okay, so this allows the project manager to assess how the developer aligns with the project's requirements and of course identify any gaps quite early on in the project. Such an evaluation can involve reviewing the developer's past work, assigning them a small but critical task, or engaging them in a technical discussion to gauge their capabilities. So by doing this, the project manager can take a proactive stance, addressing the stakeholders' concern with objective data rather than assumptions or second-hand input. Now, the stakeholder might as well be incorrect and the developer has the required skills already. So this is what you need to negate before you take this problem to the developer's line manager. This approach aligns with the PMBOK's emphasis on delivering value, focusing on outcomes, leveraging team capabilities, and evidence-based decision making on your part as a project manager. So that is why option B is the correct answer choice to this question.
So that's the end of the quiz, guys. Let me know in the comment section below how much you were able to score, okay? I'd be very interested to know that. Also, if you have scored less, please do not be demotivated, okay? You just need a bit more preparation. Do a thorough analysis of your mistakes so that you get to know about your knowledge gaps and you are able to fix those on time, okay? Thank you for watching, and I will see you again next month with another session on PMP exam practice questions and answers. Have a nice day and bye for now.